All right, so let's dive into this high-stakes standoff between the United States and Iran. It's a massive geopolitical puzzle, with consequences for the entire world. And today we're going to try to put some of those pieces together. And this, right here, is the central mystery we're unpacking. On one hand, you've got a nation whose economy is just cratering, but on the other, their negotiating team is being incredibly defiant, tough as nails. It just doesn't seem to make any sense. Let's take a quick look at the numbers. I mean, wow. If things keep going the way they are, experts are projecting a 180% inflation rate. Just think about that. That's the kind of number that doesn't just hurt an economy, it can completely shatter it. And on top of that, the crisis is expected to throw another 2 million people out of work. These aren't just statistics on a slide. That's immense human suffering for everyday Iranians. And get this. This number comes from Iran's own central bank. They figure that even if they get a deal today, it would still take 12 years just to rebuild their economy. A dozen years. So, with their backs against the wall like this, you'd think they'd be desperate for a deal, right? Well, it turns out the resistance is complicated. And the first part of the answer, according to the sources we're looking at, isn't found in Tehran, but in Washington, D.C. It has to do with President Trump's, let's call it, a unique negotiating style. The experts cited here are really blunt about it. They say President Trump had this habit of getting way out ahead of the actual negotiations. He'd publicly claim these huge victories and say Iran had agreed to all these things that, well, they hadn't even really talked about yet. And in Tehran, that was seen as a massive sign of disrespect. From Iran's perspective, this was way more than just poor communication. They saw it as a deliberate and pretty dangerous strategy. They truly believed Trump was building a fake story of them surrendering so that when Iran, of course, denied these claims, he could turn around and paint them as the bad guys and use that as an excuse to go to war. Okay, so with that kind of mistrust, how in the world did Iran push back? Well, they threatened to play their biggest card, their most powerful non-nuclear weapon, closing the Strait of Hormuz. That's a tiny waterway that a huge chunk of the world's oil has to pass through. Now, on the surface, you see these headlines, and it might look like the Iranian government is just fighting with itself. You've got the hardliners in the Revolutionary Guard making these big threats, while the diplomats are at the table trying to be reasonable. But the analysts we're looking at are pretty sure this is a carefully staged good cop, bad cop routine. It allows the negotiators to say, hey, we want to make a deal, but you've got to give us something big to take back to our military guys. It's a classic tactic, really, meant to squeeze out more concessions. And this quote from an Iranian official, it just perfectly captures their mindset. The strait isn't just some shipping lane to them. It's their ace in the hole. It's their ultimate piece of leverage, their last line of defense. It's the one thing they can do that forces the entire planet to sit up and pay attention. But here's where things get really interesting. To truly understand why Iran is acting this way, you have to look past the public faces and figure out who is actually pulling the strings. So this table, it basically shows a power structure that isn't what it looks like from the outside. Yeah, you've got the supreme leader at the top and a president, but the source material is crystal clear. The real power, the people making the final calls, is the Revolutionary Guard. This is an elite military force that also happens to control huge parts of the Iranian economy. They're the ones running these talks, and for them, this isn't about economics. It's an existential fight. And this, right here, is the absolute key to understanding everything. For the Revolutionary Guard, a collapsing economy is a problem, for sure, but it's a problem they feel they can manage. Losing their grip on power? That is a threat they cannot and will not tolerate. They genuinely believe that their nuclear program is the only thing stopping the U.S. from coming in and trying to overthrow them. It's their ultimate insurance policy. And just to give you a sense of the sheer level of paranoia that we're talking about, check this out. They were so convinced that the U.S. or Israel might try to assassinate their entire delegation on the way to the talks that they flew in on 3 separate identical decoy planes. I mean, that's not normal diplomatic procedure. That shows a profound, almost bottomless pit of mistrust. Okay, so keeping all of that in mind, the paranoia, the real motivations, let's look at the actual nuts and bolts of the deal itself and what the path forward might look like. The biggest single roadblock is uranium enrichment. The U.S. wants a complete stop for 20 years. Iran is only offering a 5-year pause. That is a massive gap to bridge, and it cuts right to the heart of the issue. Iranian national pride on one side and international fears of a nuclear weapon on the other. The other huge sticking point is what to do with the uranium they've already made. The U.S. sees this stockpile as a direct threat and wants it out of the country, period. But for Iran, having made it themselves, it's become this powerful symbol of their scientific ability and their national sovereignty. They just refuse to be seen as giving it all away. So, when you add all this up, the huge technical disagreements, the complete lack of trust, the focus on survival, the experts we're looking at are basically saying, don't hold your breath for some big historic peace treaty. The most likely outcome, a temporary truce. Just kicking the can down the road for 45 or 60 days to keep the talks from totally collapsing.
And that leaves us with a final, pretty unsettling thought. A pause is definitely better than a war. But if all this temporary truce does is put a Band-Aid on the problem without solving any of the core issues, the deep-seated mistrust, the leadership's obsession with survival, are we just delaying the inevitable? Are we just setting the stage for the next crisis?